Steve, guess what?
What, Justin?
We're back. It's week 4. We made it.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were one of those people that's just gonna say, no, guess. Come on.
No, that's stupid.
I hate those people.
Yeah, no, I'm not one of those people.
If I don't want to guess, just tell me. Otherwise, you're gonna be disappointed waiting for an answer. So I'm glad that you gave one right there. And we are back. It is week 4. We got Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 4. The world is watching.
That's the title of it.
And what an episode it was, Justin. Yes, it is.
Honestly, I haven't even looked at any of the titles other than to upload them.
Well, that's the title this week, so you better get started.
Oh, man. Yeah, dude, this episode is crazy. I know we just talked and you said you probably liked last week's episode better. I think this is my favorite one. It's just so intense and like there's so much action in it. It flew by. It was just nonstop the entire time. There's so much to get into in this episode, especially compared to last week. But oh my goodness, so good.
Oh yeah, tons to get into here, and we're gonna jump right into it. But one thing this episode did not have was dancing Zemo. There was no fist bumping in the club this week, which honestly brought it down a couple pegs for me.
You saw that Marvel released the 1 hour long extended clip of that, right?
Oh yeah, I wish it had been a 6-hour Snyder Cut edition of Zemo dancing in the club.
Oh man,
that was hysterical. For those of you who aren't aware, go ahead and check it out. Marvel Studios put out an hour-long extended clip of Baron Zemo getting down in the club.
Give the people what they want. I could not believe that was just straight up Marvel that posted that. I thought that was some other account that made some meme page or some other video or something. And then I saw it was just the official Marvel one. Hilarious.
Well, Marvel letting us know that they are in on meme culture. Okay, they get it, guys. They're cool. All right. They're hip. They're with it.
Honestly, they really are, though. They really are.
They do be. And they crushed this episode. Me saying it's not my favorite of the season, it's easily my second favorite episode of the season. It's right behind last week. Could be 1A and 1B in my hierarchy for the season. But just a stellar episode. So where do we begin this week, Justin?
The first scene is this flashback to Wakanda 6 years ago, which I had to do some mental math because I was trying to figure out with the blip in the 5 years what year they were actually in. I'm pretty sure they're in 24 at this point, which means 6 years ago for when this clip is happening is 2018, which is right before Thanos shows up, basically. Once Bucky has gone through his like cryo sleep therapy in Wakanda and is now just getting double checked essentially to make sure that he is not responding to the code words anymore. So I forget the woman's name. It's the same woman that showed up at the end of last week from the Dormal Logic to...
Her name is Io. A-Y-O. Or A-O? I-O? I believe it's I-O.
I-O. Well, I-O from the Dormal Logic is reading out all of the code words in order, which I forgot half of those were even code words. But Bucky is just there absolutely breaking down. I'm sure it's a mix of PTSD from hearing those words. I'm sure it's a mix of stress from not being totally convinced if the therapy and whatever restorative magic that the Wakandans did, not being sure if that is even working and if he's worried that he's going to slip back into Winter Soldier mode. But it's a pretty long scene of her just reading it off and him just breaking down. And then at the end, she's just like, yeah, you're free. And it's crazy. It's such a good performance by Sebastian Stan right there. It's literally just focused on his face for half of the scene, if not more, probably a couple minutes worth. And it's just like, dang, this poor dude has been through so much. And it was 6 years ago, but that's 6 years ago with the blip. So it's really in terms of his mental capacity and his memory is much more recent, which just makes a lot of sense if you think about it, why he's still so messed up in the head. Because it's really only been a little over a year, if even, that he's been freed from the Winter Soldier. And it gives a bit of a backstory to his relationship with Io as well, because she hasn't really been name dropped a whole lot in past movies in the MCU so far. So it helps give a little bit more backstory to him and a little bit more context to their relationship, which matters because she's showing up in this show now.
Yeah. Earlier in the show, we had the scene with Bucky and the therapist where he mentions how, he had a brief respite in Wakanda, but other than that, he's been going from one fight to another for, what did he say, 90 years? And so in the movies, we don't really get too much of a glimpse into that. We see him get dropped off after Civil War to get put on ice and figure out if they can kind of undeep fry his brain, which clearly we saw in the beginning of this episode worked. He was free of the Hydra secret words that would unlock his Winter Soldier mode, I guess you could say. And then, end of Black Panther, we see in the end credits, we see T'Challa bringing the new vibranium arm to Bucky, and he looks at it and he's like, where's the fight? So he knows that he's going to be involved in the future, but you can see on his face that even though he's cured at that point of his Winter Soldier Hydra inner mechanisms, that he still does not enjoy like looking out for a fight. Like, he knows that because of his abilities, he's got a job to do, but he doesn't really relish it. And so we get a glimpse into that in the beginning scene as he's clearly emotionally just breaking down, finally free of this inner coding that has been holding him hostage in his own body for decades.
Yeah, it just shows how, I don't know, I love this character. And I think Sebastian Stan does such a good job relaying just how hard this guy has had over his entire life. I don't know, I'm very excited that he's getting so much screen time and so much depth added to him because, like I said in one of the previous episodes, I think he was one of my favorite characters and has been underutilized leading into this series. So it's been really cool just getting more of a dive into what happened with him and how he's processing and dealing with it. I would be interested to know a bit of the mechanism as to how they reverse the brainwashing, but I guess that's kind of just not the most important thing.
They do kind of yada yada it. They just kind of skip to the point where he's now free, but Wakanda has vibranium, and vibranium can do anything. So we'll just chalk it up to that.
Yeah, they just give him an IV of vibranium and he's cured or something. I don't know.
Exactly. Turn him into Colossus.
Exactly. Colossus is an X-Men. Who would win?
Colossus got his butt handed to him by Angel Dust in Deadpool.
True.
So I think Bucky could handle him. Vibranium is stronger than what Colossus is made of. So
we'll have to find out because he's not adamantium. Wolverine is, but do we know which is stronger?
Colossus is not made of adamantium.
No, I know he's not. But do we know which is stronger?
I believe in the comics that adamantium is stronger than vibranium, but it may change depending on the storyline. And they're both basically just miracle metals that can do whatever the story needs them to do. So until we see the X-Men officially brought into the MCU, as we were teased with it.
Don't bring that back up.
Total red herring in WandaVision. Still not over that, by the way. Until that happens, we don't really need to worry about that. But once that happens, I'm sure there will be plenty of theorizing about adamantium versus vibranium when they exist simultaneously in the universe. But that's off the point.
That's way off topic.
Where do we go after the opening scene?
So the opening scene ends and immediately goes into the opening credit or the opening title, and then immediately jumps back to these same two characters, Bucky and Io, but they're back in, I think it's Lavia, where they had ended the last episode. Mm-hmm. And when she's basically like, yo, what the heck, bro? Why the heck did you free Zemo? Like, this dude killed T'Chaka. He killed our king. And just in their culture, it's not just a revenge thing, but it's basically like, you're shaming us. You brought shame upon us by not allowing us to bring justice to the guy that killed our king. And you can tell it's just like super serious. I mean, even the fact that they're sending her, and clearly there's more people with her, like they're not messing around when it comes to Zemo. So Bucky has to talk her down a little bit and say, hey, I'm not with him. He's just a means to an end. He actually says that in, I'm not sure what language they speak in Wakanda, but he says it in their language, which shows that he had been there a long time and has a long-standing relationship. So again, more, I'm sure, inner conflict with him having to betray people that he spent a lot of time with and treated him so well. But that just shows how much he cares about this job that has to be done and how much of a danger he knows that these super soldiers are. So she ends up giving him 8 hours and says, in 8 hours, like, we're coming to get him, which is crazy. That's so little. Like, it could take them 8 hours to even find them. And that shows that they're probably just chilling right there. They probably have an invisible plane just chilling right above that's already there just to drop on a dime when the 8 hours happens. So it's like they're kind of being watched even as they're going through this episode.
Oh yeah, you never know when the Wakandans are gonna pop out of nowhere because they have such incredible technology that allows them to hide in plain sight. I mean, in Black Panther, we saw the invisible planes, taking off from Oakland, and the kids on the basketball court noticed it. But you think that a spaceship taking off would cause a lot more stir, but clearly they're able to operate at a high level of stealth, and the Dormal Logic are exceptionally trained warriors. So it feels kind of like an arbitrary timeline. They're like, oh, we'll give you X amount of hours to get it done so that the movie, or, in this case, the episode has some urgency to it. There's a time crunch, and there's just another factor here with another group of people wanting in on the current storyline. So you're probably right about that. They are clearly monitoring the situation. There's nowhere really to hide. As they explain later, they kind of have jurisdiction wherever they are. So they're not really worried about breaking international laws because they don't care about that. Yeah, who's gonna step to a Dormal Logic? So she gives them the 8 hours, and then we get into one of the better scenes of the episode, I think, where they are able to meet with Karli. Oh wait, no, that's later.
Yeah. So before we move on, one thing I want to mention that I was noticing was that she kept calling him White Wolf, which I know is the name that has been reassigned to him as his kind of superhero name. But I think it's just cool because it shows that they value and respect his abilities and his strength in a way that also separates those from the Winter Soldier side of him, which is, it shows that the thing that's wrong with him in the past was not the fact that he has strength in the metal arm. It's specifically the brainwashing part of him. And so as he's trying to deal with this stuff, I think the fact that they reassign him, IO keeps reinforcing the name White Wolf shows like, yeah, no, you're still capable and you're able to use this ability for good rather than hating that just like you hate the past that you have. But that was just an aside that I thought was cool. And I think White Wolf is a pretty dope name. Winter Soldier is a pretty dope name too. But
well, anything's better than James. I mean, he doesn't even go by his real first name, in the beginning. He's just got nicknames out the wazoo. So James Buchanan Barnes is known by infinity aliases at this point.
He should have been the Jimmy Soldier.
Jimmy the Soldier. That's what we're calling him from now on.
Yikes. Jimmy. Yeah, no, but the next scene is Bucky, Sam, and Zemo, the squad. I'm just going to call them the Three Amigos. That's easier than saying all of their names. But the Three Amigos are chilling in Zemo's mansion, his place that he just happens to have there. And Bucky comes in and tells them that the Wakandans are there. And Zemo's like, oh, well, thanks for defending me, like for not just turning me in. And Sam's like, yeah, nobody's defending you. You literally just straight up shot the doctor, Nagel, last episode. But then there was this line that just made me laugh where Zemo's like, do we really have to litigate what may or may not have happened? And Sam's like, bro, there's nothing to litigate. You straight up shot the dude. Like, Zemo is still trying to do his silver tongue, It's just hilarious. Like, there's no defense. He straight up shot the dude, and he's trying to be like, let's not argue about what may or may not have happened. That was killing me.
Yeah, I fully agree. That was one of the funniest lines in the episode for me. To hear Sam go, yeah, you shot this guy. We're not defending you. And he's like, well, let's not argue about what may or may not have happened. We don't know what happened down in there. Anything could have gone wrong. And they're like, no, we watched you shoot this guy. There's nothing to argue.
We were purposely not going to shoot this guy, and you did.
And he's like, semantics. It was one of the funnier moments of the episode. Zemo continues to be one of the funniest characters in the MCU.
He's so excellent.
Intentionally and unintentionally.
Yeah, so excellent. He's such an improvement from Civil War. Like, I thought he was pretty decent in Civil War, but getting to see him now is just such a fun character. But Bucky also goes on to tell them that the GRC supply shelter was bombed, which is what we saw last episode with Karli Morgenthau and the Flag Smashers blowing up that building. And this is where we get a little bit more insight into Zemo's kind of philosophy on the super soldiers and on the Flag Smashers. He calls Karli a supremacist and basically goes on to say that super soldiers as a entity and as an idea basically stems from a supremacist ideology, and an ideology that led to most of the evil things that's happened in the MCU over the last few years. He names Nazis. I mean, Nazis was more than a few years ago, but the Nazis, Ultron, and even the Avengers, which we know he views the Avengers as a negative, as a net evil in the world. Basically this idea that like there are certain people and groups of people that, due to some feature about them, are just inherently more valuable than others. And so in some cases it's, well, there's this person of a certain ethnicity or something like with the Nazis. And Zemo's saying that, yeah, even having people that are super soldiers, that are super people, basically just better people, like that comes from, and that leads to supremacist ideology that ranks people based on these characteristics, which is interesting. And I don't know, we would have to see it play out more. But what he's saying doesn't seem totally off base.
No, I agree with you.
Even if it's based on a lot of assumptions.
No, I agree with you fully on that. Part of the reason that I'm enjoying Zemo's inclusion in the show so much is because he's gotten so much character development as the episodes have progressed. We've learned about him and his personal life outside of, just being the villain from Civil War. We learned a lot more, especially in this episode, as you've mentioned, about his exact ideology and why he believes what he believes. And he's got a valid point. We've seen up until this point, everything has been from the perspective of our main heroes. Every movie, even WandaVision, has been from Wanda's point of view for a majority of it. And even in Spider-Man Far From Home, which was the first MCU entry after everybody was blipped back into existence, they kind of played off the blip for laughs. Like, oh, haha, the band came back in the middle of a basketball game. Everybody fell over. It's hilarious. Now we're seeing the real life impacts on everyday people. And Zemo obviously is not an everyday person, but we're seeing how somebody outside of the main group of Avengers would feel as he witnesses their goings on and the results of their actions. Obviously throughout Infinity War and Endgame, we're rooting for the team and our heroes to stop Thanos and when they fail, to reverse what he did and bring everybody back, because it's the right thing to do and they have to save all these people. But there are going to be real life consequences to that. And I like that this show is dealing with it. And I like that this show is offering us outsider perspectives on our heroes that show them as flawed. They're not all perfect individuals, even though some of them might seem to be in other entries. They make mistakes, and because of their abilities, those mistakes can have drastic impacts. So Zemo makes a great point here. Not saying that I agree with him fully, but the Thanos was right crew might have another guy to get behind here. The Zemo was right bandwagon may be starting here.
Yeah, no, it's really cool just getting more depth into these villains. Although I don't know if he's technically considered a villain in this series yet. I would say so still, just given the past that we have with him. But yeah, no, he definitely has a point, and even if he doesn't, he's very good at saying things in a way that come across sounding like, oh yeah, that makes sense, I agree with that. So part of it's his delivery and part of it is what he's actually saying, which I think is what makes him so compelling so far. And yeah, Sam just says that Karli Morgenthau is just a kid. He's like, you're kind of going way overboard here, Zemo. She's just a kid that's trying to do what she thinks is right. And he says that there has to be a peaceful way to end the conflict with the Flag Smashers and with her, which I'm not totally sure where this hopeless optimism is coming from Sam. Like, I understand she's just a kid, and we know that the Flag Smashers are operating under the philosophy of trying to help people who have been displaced or disaffected by the blip. But like, he has never met her. He's never had a conversation with her. He doesn't really know what drives her more than just getting stuff for people. And she literally just blew up a building with people still in it for no reason after getting all the stuff she needed. Like, if they were just trying to help people and get the supplies, they would have just taken the supplies and brought them to people. She went way overboard, and that was what you and I had expressed frustration with last week, is that it kind of took a bit of the nuance away. And now we can see they're trying to put it back in by having one of our main heroes say out loud that, oh, basically there's nuance because she's just a kid. And I think he even says, like, her motivations are different than any of the villains we fought before. And I don't know if that's true, because Thanos' motivation was to help the universe by bringing balance to it. And it was very clear that the ends did not justify his means, and he was very clearly the villain, even though there was nuance there. And this is similar. I mean, even if she thinks what she's doing is correct and will help a lot of people, just the ends do not justify the means that she's gone by. But the show's just trying to have us believe that it could be because Sam says it. And I don't get, from his perspective, having just fought Thanos, why he's defending her the way that he is. It seems a little bit forced. But either way, Sam says there has to be a peaceful way to end the conflict. And I think Bucky and Zemo both seem pretty skeptical at that.
Yeah, they do seem skeptical, and as the audience, I agree. We are definitely on, at least you and I are, more on Bucky and Zemo's side in this discussion. There may have been a valid point to Sam's argument before last week, but when she decides to simply just blow up a building full of people to make her point, because, as she says, quote unquote, this is the only language these people understand, it's hard to sympathize with her. And I understand Sam. He's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it to make her not just a simply evil character. Though by the end of the episode, it seems like kind of everybody's after her. So clearly painting her as the main antagonist of the show, despite the fact that Walker takes a very antagonistic turn and the power broker's still out there. There's certainly, if you want to say villainous, threats out there besides Morgenthau. But it seems clear at this point that she's being set up as the main threat for this show, her and her band of flag smasher super soldiers.
Yeah, and I think it's tricky still, even though maybe she doesn't have quite as much of the nuance as the show is telling us that there is, even if we don't think that there's quite as much as it seems to be. It's definitely a very tricky situation, because there has been so much public support for the flag smashers that even if we think that she is a total villain and is irredeemable, which I don't necessarily think that's true either, but even if we take that assumption, making her a martyr is probably not something that will resolve this quickly either. So I think he's right in that a peaceful way is probably still the most effective way to deal with the flag smashers and with the situation. But I also don't agree with the idea that that should be done because she's just a kid and whatever. I mean, she is. So I think it's a bit nuanced, but she's clearly in need of a beatdown. As are all the flag smashers.
Yes, she is, especially after the end of this episode. And we'll get further on.
Yeah, well, let's keep moving. So the next part is they go to try to find Mama Danya's funeral, just because Sam is like, well, we got to figure out some way to find Karli. If we're going to have any attempt at a peaceful resolution, we have to find her so we can talk with her. Mm-hmm. And they're like, maybe...
Yep, Mama Danya being Karli's, seems like her kind of emotional mentor. She was kind of a leader of these people who have been displaced by the blip. You see the inside of their facility a little bit later, as it seems kind of like a homeless shelter, I want to say. It seems like they're just taking in anybody who, again, like I said, has been displaced by the blip, and they're all in the same boat, so they're trying to figure things out together. And we don't, unfortunately, I'd love to see a flashback where Karli is interacting with Danya, because he clearly had a large impact on her and the rest of the people that are now following Karli as well. I would have loved to see that relationship be built out a bit, and maybe we'll get that in a future episode with a flashback, but I would have loved to see that before her character died, so that we could see before the relationship being built up and then feel the true impact of her death on Karli. But clearly, without that, we can still see that she's a major figure in Karli's life. We see her speaking at the funeral in a few more scenes, and it's packed. Everybody was there to pay their respects to this woman who had a huge impact on them. And clearly it hits Karli hard.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty classic situation where it would be better to show than to tell, kind of like how Sam is telling us that there's more nuance than we've seen, at least. And again, we're told that they had this really tight relationship, even though all we've seen of Mama Danya is just her on her deathbed. So I'm hoping we get some sort of a flashback as well. I think that could be really powerful, which there's another flashback I'm hoping to get, but we'll get to that down the line. I think you have the same one in mind. But since she's this big pillar of the community, Sam figures that there's probably going to be some sort of a big funeral, some big gathering, celebration of life type of thing that everyone will be at, including probably Karli. And it's funny because he says, when my TT died, and Bucky and Zemo are like, what the heck are you talking about? Who the heck is TT? And he's like, my aunt. That was a little bit of a funny back and forth, but basically because he knew that had happened, and he feels like he can relate very much to these people, just people who've had a rough go of it in life, which is clearly what Sam's upbringing and what his sisters and family has gone through. He's like, this is probably something that they're doing. Let's check it out and see if we can find where and when this funeral is. Maybe we can find Karli and talk to her there. So they walk out, they're out on the streets, and they're just looking around. Sam goes up and tries to talk with people that are up in this building, and everywhere he's walking away, people are just going and closing the door, not making eye contact with him, not engaging with him, not even really responding to him when he asks them questions, except for one guy who looks like he's a teacher teaching a couple of young kids. And they have this back and forth where Sam's like, I'm here to help. And the guy's like, yeah, we've heard that from a lot of people and nobody has. The GRC was supposed to send teachers a month or 6 months ago, I think, and they haven't sent anything. They haven't sent any supplies. And here we get another situation where Sam is coming in, like, promising to help. He's like, maybe I can talk to some people. And the guy's like, I know who you are. I don't trust you. Like, I don't think there's anything you can do. And it's a bit strange because, again, we see him promising to help somebody without really the ability to back it up. Like when he tries to get his sister alone and it doesn't work out. When he promises to get Sharon, get her name cleared in the States, we don't know if he even has the ability to do that. And then here he's doing it again. So it shows how big his heart is, that he's always trying to help and he cares a lot. It's just sometimes he overreaches what his actual capabilities or influence is. But regardless, it's interesting here because we see, not everyone views the Avengers as heroes. Even if people know who they are, not everyone looks at them and says, oh, this person is on my side, which is interesting and probably a shock to him getting autographs wherever he goes and things like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you make that point about Sam always trying to help people. Like we've both expressed before, we're both disappointed that he did not take up the mantle of Captain America as was given to him by Captain America himself at the end of Endgame. But this is clearly setting him up to take the mantle in the future. We see John Walker as a Captain America who was clearly a stellar soldier and is capable of carrying out missions as a soldier, but isn't really able to connect with people on a personal level and isn't really looking to help them. He's really just looking to get the job done. And I think that's the biggest thing that's missing that makes him so clearly not the actual Captain America. You know, Steve Rogers in the beginning, in the first Avenger, even has that conversation with Erskine where, you know, he's asked, do you hate Nazis or do you want to kill Nazis? He's like, I don't want to kill anybody. I just don't like bullies. And so he's just looking out to stick up for the little guy wherever he is. And Walker clearly does not share that mentality. He's just looking to carry out his mission, whatever it is, while Sam clearly has more of Steve in him, where he is looking to help the people, the disadvantaged, the underprivileged, those people in need of it, regardless of where they are, whether or not they're, you know, American or Latvian or wherever they may be. He's looking to extend a helping hand. Even if he can't physically do all the necessary things to help out himself, he wants it to happen for those people in need. And so maybe what he needs is just to be able to be powered up a little by the end of the show and be able to take on some bigger threats by himself personally. So we'll see where that goes, but I think the dichotomy, especially in this episode between Sam and Walker's methodologies here is really what's going to separate them and have the mantle carry over at the end of this show, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's just why Steve chose to give the shield to Sam rather than Bucky, because he is all those things. Not that Bucky isn't necessarily compassionate or giving in the way that Sam has been shown to be, but just because the whole point of Captain America is the symbol and is the selflessness. And it's clear that Sam has that in a way that not a lot of characters do, which is why it's just like, I cannot wait for him to actually get the shield. Although, honestly, I wouldn't give up my wings if I was him. And it seems kind of hard to fly with the shield and the wings. So I don't know if it would be powering him up to give him a shield and take away his wings and his guns and stuff.
Well, I don't necessarily think he has to give up his wings in order to grab the shield. I think he can do both. Why not, ladies? Get you a man that can do both.
A flying Captain America.
Flying Captain America, yeah. That's exactly what I want to see. I want to see Sam in a red, white, and blue wingsuit with the shield, juiced up on something, just kicking butt by the end of this show. And we'll see if we get it. But
very aerodynamic.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, but either way, while Sam is having this conversation, we switch over a little bit to Bucky and Zemo, who are doing the same thing outside, trying to talk with people and find where this funeral potentially could be. And Zemo walks out and dumps a bunch of Turkish delight on this stool near a bunch of kids, which I think this is maybe not a nod to, but it made me think of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia. Just Turkish delight is always associated with that in my head. Just this idea of sweet temptation that clearly Zemo exudes. And he dumps it out. These kids come over. It's kind of creepy. But this little girl comes up and takes them, and he says, "Do you know where my friend Danya's funeral will be?" And she tells him. And then he also tells her that Sam and Bucky, he looks over his shoulder and says, "You see those two men there? They are bad men and are not to be trusted." And it just reinforces that he's not on their side, even though he's doing things currently that are, in the same path, that are with the same mission in mind as they are. He is not on their side, and he's looking for ways to get out and to turn them against each other and all that. Neither of them is there to hear him say this, but it just shows that. And it's interesting because him saying this doesn't really come up again this episode, and it seems like the next episode might move locations. So I'm not quite sure if this ends up making an impact on the plot at all, or if it just informs us that he's not really with them still. I'm not really sure, because it doesn't pop up again this episode, even though it hinted like it might. But Zemo is funny and great.
Yeah, he's still a little skeevy, trying to further his own goals, and we still don't know what that is. We know at this point that he is trying to take out super soldiers from existence, and we assume he's trying to stay out of prison. But is there anything more to Zemo's scheme than that, do you think? Is there some third motive that is driving him? Because he clearly is not on their side, even though they're both trying to accomplish the same goal. And you'd think that maybe with helping out, he could get some time off his prison sentence. So we'll see if he's just trying to stay out of harm's way by evading them when everything is all done, or if he's got some other plan up his sleeve. But we will see as it moves forward.
Mm-hmm. If he has one, he's come up with it very quickly, because he just got out of jail and didn't even know he would necessarily be out of jail. Although I'm sure he was thinking in there of some plot he would have if he ever got out. So maybe he's just mad that the Avengers are back together and he wants to have them have another civil war or something. I don't know. But yeah, what's up next in the episode?
So next, they actually are able to, with the information that Zemo acquired from the little girl, they're able to go set up a meeting with Morgenthau. Sam walks into the funeral. Everybody, has kind of cleared out at this point, and he is able to have a conversation with Karli, where they kind of go over what they have in common. As you mentioned before, Sam has had a rough lot of it in life as well. For much of it, and so he relates to people who are going through similar things. He knows what it's like to lose. For him or as a relative, we don't know if Karli and Danya were actually related, but basically, a familiar mother figure for her passed away, akin to a family member. So he knows what she's going through emotionally in terms of that, and he kind of lays it out there for her. He's like, "Look, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to fight right now. I just want to kind of figure out what's going on." And he's like, "I agree with your cause, but I don't agree with the way you're going about it."
Yeah, and this is where you can see his history and his background coming into play. We actually breezed past a couple scenes that happened, a couple very short scenes that give a little bit more context to this. But in one, Sam talks about his history working with soldiers that have PTSD, which is what we saw in The Winter Soldier, where he's leading the counseling for the veterans. And so he knows how to talk with people that are upset and have trauma. And so this is something he knows how to do. He knows how to get to the root of people. He knows how to be therapeutic in the way that he interacts with people. And it's clear that Karli has suffered a lot of trauma through the displacement and through the death of a lot of people she knows. I'm assuming that Danya was not the only person that she was close to that died. And she's very conflicted, which is, we can see from another scene that we kind of breeze past, where she's basically questioning if she's doing the right thing by taking the serum and giving it to more people, which is something they're considering doing as the Flag Smashers. And so she's this immensely conflicted and immensely just stressed out, messed up in the head character right now, just with everything she's been through and the pressure she's put on herself to care for all these people. And Sam is able to come in and kind of cut through all that and say, hey, you kind of stepped too far, even though you have what you view as good intentions. And I agree with you that they are good intentions, but you've gone too far. You're off the deep end. I mean, he doesn't say it like that. He kind of gets her to admit it herself, actually. He's like, you're killing innocent people. And she says, no, I'm not. There are roadblocks in my way, and I'd kill them again if I'd have to. And he's like, oh, gotcha. And she's like, oh, I didn't mean to say it. You made me sound like some sort of a, and he's like, some sort of a what? And he kind of gets her admitting that what she's doing is really horrible and really wrong, even if they both think that the ends are justified and the ends are something that they need to strive for. And I think his history with his sister plays into this too. I think this is a big part of why we got to see a bit of Sam's family earlier on in the season. Just the struggle that they've dealt with, the fact that his sister, her whole business got super messed up by the blip, and they're going to have to lose their boat, like his entire childhood, right, because of the blip and the displacement. And it seems like they were struggling before that even still. And so he's like, I very much relate to your drive and to your mission, but I cannot get on board with the way you're doing it. He has one line in there, I think, where she says, what if I'm making the world a better place? And he's like, if you're killing people, you're not making it better, it's just different. And that kind of touches on a little bit of what Zemo had said as well. Because I think if it's different, but in the way that Karli wants it to be, she would view that as better. And part of that would be that she would be more in control. And so it's, again, a bit of this supremacist attitude that Zemo had hinted towards, where it's like, yeah, it's not better, it's still just evil being done. Just you're not on the receiving end of it, but you think that's better, as if your well-being is more important or more to be valued than others. So it's really interesting, this whole conversation, and it should go much longer and it should be much more productive, but that dang idiot.
That dang Dr. Walker.
Oh, this dude.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
I was ready to throw my remote at the TV.
Yep. And one of the scenes that I apologize for breezing past it, but as they're rolling up to the funeral, the three amigos, they're accosted by Battlestar and Dr. Walker. You know, they're like, how'd you find us? And like, come on, you really think two Avengers can just walk around Latvia without drawing some attention? Like, come on.
They weren't really walking around even. They were in the house like 90% of the time. But
well,
whatever.
It doesn't really matter. Bucky with a metal arm is one of the most recognizable people on the planet.
That's
and
fair.
They made a joke earlier that they didn't recognize Sam without the wingsuit, but come on. I mean, the Avengers are probably like the 15 most recognizable people on the planet.
That's fair.
You saw in Far From Home that Tony Stark has monuments and graphics and art of him all over the world, after Endgame. And obviously he's a very well-known person, but it's not like people wouldn't know the other members of the team as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's obvious that they would be seen. So Hoskins and Walker roll up on the three amigos in Latvia, and they forcefully tag along on this mission. They allow Sam to go in and talk to Karli, but Walker's like, listen, you got 10 minutes and we're going to go in guns blazing because we don't know, like, she's dangerous. Like, we got to take her down at all costs. Again, kind of leading, us to the point where Walker is clearly not worthy of the Captain America mantle. He's complete the mission at all costs type of person, as opposed to looking to help people in need.
Steven.
A defining trait of Captain America.
Steven, was there a single ounce of doubt in your mind that he was going to sprint in and mess it all up?
Oh, zero.
Zero
chance that he wasn't going to ruin the day.
As soon as he said you got 10 minutes, I was like, there's not a single soul on the planet watching this that believes he's going to wait 10 minutes.
No, and he doesn't. We see that we see that happen. He rumbles through, guns blazing in a symbolic sense, as he rolls up on a totally fine conversation between Sam and Karli and is like, "You're under arrest. Put your hands behind your head." Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, you absolutely walked in and saw this completely under control. And because you got the spangly outfit on now, you feel like you have to be the alpha and do things your way. Clearly it was working. You had no insight into the conversation beforehand, and you went in and did things your way regardless of what was happening. So Karli understandably freaks out and is like, "Wow, Sam, you set this up before, so we could just talk before your backup arrived?" And he was like, "No, like that's not he gets defensive. He's like, "No, that wasn't the plan at all." And so she clearly books it out of there. She's not getting arrested by Walker, no shot. So she dips, escapes through the maze of hallways and tunnels seemingly in this place that she knows, and loses everybody except for one person, and that person is Zemo. She's making her way to, it seems like a garage. It's her exit, some sort of open area of the facility, and Zemo catches up with her right there. He does not hesitate to shoot at her multiple times, and he might have even got her once, but either way, we know Zemo doesn't give a crap about killing super soldiers. Like, that's his goal. He is not going to hesitate on the trigger whatsoever. And Karli, escapes with her life, but only because Zemo notices something that's more important to him than just one super soldier, and that is a container of all the remaining vials of the super soldier serum. So instead of killing Karli, he decides to take his chance and smash as many of the containers as he can. He thinks he gets all of them, but right then Walker rolls up on him, knocks him out with the shield, and spots in the corner one last vial that was not smashed, the last dose of super soldier serum on the planet as far as we know. And he takes a look at it, and again, I'll bounce the same question right back to you. Is there any doubt in anybody's mind that he wasn't going to take that?
Not a chance.
Zero chance.
Not a single chance he did not take that immediately. It was, they try to play it off as like, will he, won't he? It was not a shot in the universe that dude was not taking that vial and sticking it right up in this, whatever the vein in your arm is called.
I mean, is it a suppository? It could be. I don't know how you take it. It seemed like a vial, or maybe you drink it. Maybe it's like a Jello shot. You never know. They don't show us him taking it, but they do have a scene later.
Also, how is Zemo not just straight up dead? He took the shield to the side of his face. On the edge. That dude's head should be sliced in half.
Yeah, gotta love the inconsistent injuries and damage done to the characters here. Walker is not a super soldier by any means at this point in the story, but he is still an extremely strong normal human, throwing a deadly vibranium shield directly at somebody's temple from short distance. And Zemo's like, "Oh, ow, that hurt. I'm going to sleep now." Instead of having his temple gashed open and his brain is falling out on the floor.
He's on that NFL CTE recovery system.
He's on that Pat Mahomes concussion recovery protocol right there. Because he's back in action in like the next scene, which is unbelievable. But yeah, clearly there's a long shot where Walker kind of contemplates the serum, and you can see the internal struggle, like, do I take this? Do I not? What do I do with this? At the end of the scene, he slips it into his pocket, and we're like, okay, this is obviously happening at some point. And then there's a scene later where he and Hoskins are, I guess, in a kind of food court or some mall or some public area, and they're just having a conversation about it. And he's like, "Listen, if you had the chance, would you take it?" And Hoskins immediately is like, "Hell yeah, I would take it. Are you kidding me?" Walker expresses his kind of qualms he has about taking it. He's like, it says it amplifies everything inside. He's like, we've done as soldiers like some really terrible stuff. Sure, you can say it was for the greater good, but like the actions themselves that we did, objectively horrible. And he's like, as somebody who's capable of that, like, I don't know if that's would be good for me to do. And clearly he's speaking hypothetically to Hoskins here, because Hoskins doesn't know that he has the last dose on him. But Hoskins replies, he's like, "You know what? You're probably right. But if we had the serum, think about how many lives we could have saved in those missions that we were on. Like, there wouldn't have needed to be loss of life if we were Captain America and we could just save the day as a super soldier." And that is clearly what pushes Walker over the edge here. We don't see him take the serum, but later he shows up and he's clearly juiced up on a little something something. And so it's obvious that he's taken it.
Yeah, this is what I had hinted at earlier. what I had referenced earlier, this is the flashback that I want to see in the next episode. And I would be pretty surprised if we don't get it next episode. Maybe we'll get it in the finale. But I'm fully expecting to get some sort of a backstory on Hoskins and Walker, what happened to them in Afghanistan that earned the Medals of Honor that clearly he's not very proud of, Dr. Walker is. I honestly wouldn't be surprised, and I'm going to predict that the opening scene for the next episode is going to be the flashback, giving a bit more context as to why this dude snaps. Because in that same scene, Hoskins is like, you're the guy that always makes the right decision in the heat of battle. And it's like, no, he's not. Literally, this episode, the dude barged in and messed up the whole peace talks with Karli. Like, it wasn't even the heat of battle. He had to just stand there and wait. He wasn't fighting anybody. He just had to stand and wait. And he made a terrible, horrible decision. It's just too impulsive and too worried about how he's perceived. But I'm really interested to see where that comes from. And I think he'll be more sympathetic after that sort of a backstory, although right now I still just, this whole episode, I was rooting for this dude to get beat up.
So that conversation with Hoskins happens a little bit later in the episode, but immediately after he grabs the last vial and stops Zemo from breaking it all, they bring Zemo back to kind of their safe house, and the Dormal Logic are like, hey, we're here. It's been 8 hours. Hand him over. And Walker is just, he's never been alphaed so hard in his life, especially not by a couple of women from a totally different country that, he doesn't respect at all, clearly. He's like, listen, I'm Captain America. The Dormal Logic don't have jurisdiction here. And they're like, listen, the Dormal Logic have jurisdiction wherever they find themselves, okay? We're here for Zemo. Get out the way. And they just absolutely hand it to Hoskins and Walker. This was one of the best fight scenes we've seen, I think, hand-to-hand combat-wise, like since Winter Soldier. This was fantastic stuff.
Bro, this was so stupid. He's like, you don't have jurisdiction. You're in freaking Latvia. Like, you're Captain America. You don't have jurisdiction there either. And you were trying to arrest Karli. Like, he's so in his own brain. And he just is so arrogant and so hateable and so punchable. I was like, if these ladies do not kick this dude's behind, I'm going to walk away so sad. And they just hand it to him. It's a beautiful thing to witness. He's starting disrespect too. He's like, let's put the pointy sticks down, trying to like belittle them. He just has no clue what he's walking into, and he just gets pounded. And it's a beautiful thing.
He gets a thorough ass whooping, and I
amazing.
loved every second of it.
Yeah.
At the end, Zemo in the kerfuffle kind of escapes. Falcon is like, oh, he pulled an El Chapo as he sees a hole underneath the bathtub in the safe house that Zemo apparently escaped through. Interestingly, El Chapo apparently exists in the MCU. Awesome. Little Easter egg there.
Maybe he'll pop in at some point.
Would love to see that. But yeah, the Dormal Logic absolutely thrash Walker and Hoskins. And at the end of it, Walker is just in total shock. He's like, they weren't even super soldiers, and I just got absolutely manhandled by like basically normal people. He's like, I'm way out of my depth here. We saw him get beat up by Karli and the Flag Smashers in episode 2 from the truck chase, and clearly he sees that he is just, despite being a clear physical specimen, he is just not on the same level, not even on the same planet as somebody with a super soldier serum, much less the Dormal Logic. And so this kind of is, I think, the final straw for him prior to the conversation with Hoskins. It seems like in the conversation with Hoskins, he's like looking for a reason to not take it. If Hoskins had said, absolutely, I wouldn't take it, kind of back him off the ledge and be like, look, here are the reasons why this would be a bad idea. I don't think you should do it. It seems like that's kind of what he's looking for, especially since he knows the dangers of taking the serum, as well. He outlines them in the conversation. But clearly the earlier fight is weighing heavily on his mind, as he has gotten now beat up in both fights that he's been in that we have seen. So clearly he feels like he needs a little something to put him over the edge. And fortunately for him, he has that little something right in his pocket.
Yeah, and it's so bad. It's going to be a train wreck that he takes it, and the whole time you're just like, please don't take it, please don't take it. But there's not a chance that he does not. And especially after he gets beat up, and Bucky and Sam actually try to help out against the Dormal Logic, which we get we find out, we get a fun little fact that Bucky's arm is just able to be disabled and taken completely off, which like makes sense if you're the Wakandans just building a failsafe just in case. But they just take his arm off and are like, yeah, good try.
Yeah, she hits him with the Kung Fu Panda Tai Lung pressure point. Kung Fu goes boop 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 boop, and his arm just falls off on the floor. That was amazing.
They just have to skadoosh Karli and they'll win.
Got to do the wushu finger hold.
Oh man, but it was great seeing him get beat up. It was awesome, but I also think that was what pushed him over the edge a little bit. And then he takes it, and we get confirmation of that later on. Earlier on in the episode, Sam reached out to Sharon. We kind of breezed past that a little bit as well. But he reached out to Sharon, who apparently can just do literally anything. She's like, oh yeah, I have access to multiple satellites. I'll just...
Because she's the power broker.
Because she's the power broker. Or it's the worst red herring, biggest red herring in the world. In which case, whatever.
That could not be the worst red herring in the world because of Ralph Boner.
That's true.
That will be the worst red herring until that gets resolved, or I can't even imagine anything more egregious happening. That's a whole different can of worms. I'm going to get worked up talking about it. But
it's too soon, bro.
Sharon Carter, power broker. She's got some stuff hidden away that's helping out the three amigos here.
Yeah. But either way, she somehow has access to this satellite or whatever, and so she ends up using it to track Walker and Hoskins, which matters because we get a scene slightly before this where Karli Morgenthau ends up calling Sarah, Sam's sister, and basically just threatening her, which is, again, we lose a little bit of the nuance. We're like, okay, she claims that she's a good guy and that she doesn't want to hurt anybody, and she's just doing this because she has to do what she has to. And it's like, you're threatening like an innocent woman and her kids. That's not okay. That's so far past the line. And she, through Sarah, ends up setting up a meeting with Sam. And there's a neat little part here where she tells Sam to come alone, and Sam tells Bucky, he's like, they threatened my sister, I have to go and meet, and they told me to come alone. And Bucky, without hesitation, says, I'm coming with you. And Sam just like is like, yeah, totally. He doesn't say it, just goes to the next scene, but he's totally on board. And it's like, we've seen throughout these episodes, even though they get on each other's nerves, like they've come a long way in terms of being on the same page and being partners and having each other's backs. There's a multiple times during this episode, there's too many to even count, where they have each other's backs, where they defend each other, where they protect each other from Walker, from Karli, from whatever. And it's just like, dang, they're starting to come to really working together. The fact that Bucky, without hesitation, is like, I'm coming with you, and Sam doesn't fight back at all. He's just like, yeah, of course you're coming with me. And that's just really cool to see, because we're starting to actually see the Falcon and the Winter Soldier be the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And yeah, but they go and they meet up with Karli, and while they're there, she's like, okay, clearly you didn't come alone. And then Sharon calls and is like, yo, by the way, Walker and Hoskins are on your doorstep. Again, terrible timing, right as they were about to talk things out. And this dude just busts in, guns blazing again. And so there ends up being this big fight, which is excellent because there was not a whole lot of a breather between the last fight scene and this one. There was just so much action in this episode. It was awesome. But once again, they're ruining the moment and just barging in, and like it's just a long action scene here. But the whole time I'm just like, please, somebody knock this fool, please.
And so as Walker and Hoskins kind of make their way in, Walker goes in guns blazing, bigger guns here because he's got the serum, and you see that as he holds his own against the super soldier flag smashers. Something that wasn't happening before. He was getting tossed around like a little rag doll, and now he's going toe to toe easily. Hoskins, however, kind of gets knocked out and tied up on his way in, and so Walker kind of goes a little bit too hard. He's like, look, they got Hoskins, we have to go save them. And he just kind of battering rams his way through the building looking for his partner. Hoskins eventually is able to get himself free and joins the fight, but Walker is kind of already on edge after noticing that his partner is MIA. And so he shows up, they're fighting back against the flag smashers. And then all of a sudden, Karli Morgenthau hits Hoskins with apparently the world's biggest Falcon punch. And he goes flying back into a pillar and dies. Hoskins, RIP. We barely knew you. aside from your lame nickname, I thought he was going to be a really cool character. I certainly did not expect him to just bite the dust in his third episode of ever being in the show and ever being in the MCU. That was quite a shock, especially because you and I had mentioned this a little before we started recording, but it seems like, depending on the character, they can take a ridiculous amount of damage and be fine. You know, like we said earlier, Zemo got the shield to the temple and was like, owie, I'm fine, after a nice ice pack. You know, but Hoskins gets punched into a pillar and just dies immediately. And we know he's not a super soldier, so obviously taking a punch from a super soldier is going to hurt. Going back first into a pillar, going to get a lot of whiplash, might snap his head back. You know, we don't see the exact cause of death here, but Walker runs over. He's like, wake up, buddy, come on, we got to go. It's like, wake up. But Hoskins isn't waking up. And this is the moment where Walker absolutely loses it. He's been teetering on edge for a couple episodes now, and with the serum pushing him right to the brink, Hoskins' death just gives him a big old shove right off the cliff, and he just goes berserker mode. He gets up and just looks for the first flag smasher he can find. He's looking for Karli, but she's already fled the scene. He finds a flag smasher. I believe his name is Nico. I could be wrong about that, but he was in a scene, a very quick scene earlier with Karli, where he talks about how Captain America was actually like a childhood hero of his, and he was a big fan of him, which makes the next scene even wilder. Walker chases this guy through the streets, catches up with him, and just straight up murders him in the middle of the street. He punches him a few times. He's like, where is she? Where is she? He's looking for Karli, but he's not even getting an answer. And so he just takes the shield out over his head. And it reminded me of the scene in Civil War when Cap and Tony are fighting, where Steve does the same thing, but instead brings it down onto Tony's chest and just breaks the arc reactor in his shield, in his suit, instead of taking his head off. But Walker has no such reservations. I'm sure he decapitated this guy. They didn't show it because it's still Marvel. It's still only going to be PG-13. They can only get so gory. But he was wailing away at this guy with the edge of his shield in the middle of the street. And this is one of the new enduring images from the MCU, in my opinion. People are around him taking video. It's all filmed. Everybody's taking notice. And this is where the title of the episode comes from, as the world watches the new Captain America straight up murder a guy in broad daylight. But he's just beating on this guy with the edge of the shield repeatedly. And he finally stands up and straps the shield back on. And there's just blood all over it, everywhere. And that was horrifying.
Yeah, it was crazy. That's the moment where you're like, this guy is too far gone. And I don't know. I was so stunned by this. And it was really well made. Like, the music just had your heart pounding the entire time. There's a brief moment after Hoskins gets killed where everyone who's fighting just stops and looks at each other and is like, oh crap, that was bad. And then all of the flag smash just take off, and then everything you just described happens. But from that moment on, it's just a non-stop, just like the music is getting more intense. Walker does a superhero landing. He just yeets out a window, like a 6-story window, and lands on a bus, does the superhero landing with his shield. And you're just like, this dude is out for blood. This dude is not coming back without killing somebody. If it's Karli, then he's happy. If not, he's killing somebody. And it's just like, this is what happens when power gets in the hands of someone who's unstable. And the dude is like begging for his life too, which is crazy. He's like, please, it wasn't me. Like, I didn't do it. And it's just like, it was mind-blowing to me that they included that in a Disney show. It was mind-blowing to me that they included that.
Yeah, this is not for the faint of heart, this episode. Kids, double check with your parents before watching this episode. Parents, you probably may not even want to watch it either. Now, who knows? We don't know what kind of parents are out there listening to this. Certainly no, ours would not have let us watch this, back in the day. That's for sure. Wild stuff to end this episode. I was in shock. I still can't believe it happened. And I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for next week's episode to see the fallout from Captain America again. Straight up murdering someone in full view of the general public.
and it's going to be everywhere. And this is something that I thought was going to be in play more back in the second episode. Was it the second episode? I think maybe it was the third episode when they're in Madripoor, where Bucky is in the club, or well, the three amigos are in the club, and Bucky is fighting the guys, and everyone has their cameras out. I thought that was going to come more into play with Bucky on this road to redemption, potentially being on the internet for everyone to see, just beating up people in the middle of the public, right? And now we're seeing this on an even bigger scale because it's the Shield, it's Cap's Shield, and actually murdering someone instead of just beating up a bunch of people and leaving them, beat up in a club brawl or something. It's just like the ramifications from this are just insane. This seems like something that would happen on The Boys, not on an MCU Disney Plus show. Like
that is exactly the vibe that I got at the end. I got Homelander vibes when I saw somebody else in the Captain America suit, and I absolutely got Homelander vibes when he just killed a guy with the symbol of freedom and justice in his hands, basically. So yeah, major ramifications for the future here. What's going to happen to Walker? Hoskins is gone. Is there anybody that can hold Walker in check? Is he just going to go rogue? What's going to happen with the public viewing of his horrible deed? We're also wondering, where's Zemo and where's Karli? They both kind of escaped by the end of the episode, and we don't know exactly where they're headed. Karli had mentioned earlier that she had just called Sam's family to get his attention and had no intention of hurting them. But now she's a little more desperate. They're out of the serum, and Power Broker is on the Flag Smashers' tail about that, as well as she just lost one of her friends and is on the run again from now somebody who is on clearly a vengeful mission to get her, even more than he was before. I feel like Walker will not stop at anything to get Karli, and seems like he's just going to try to kill her after killing Hoskins. So she's very desperate now, and it makes you think maybe she will turn to Sam's family. She knows who they are, she knows where they are somehow, and so maybe she'll turn to them as a way to get out of her situation. But Zemo's gone after his escape. We don't see him again, and so where's he at?
There's so many factors in play here. I'm so curious to see how this all wraps up. And I was about to say, I don't know how they're going to bring this all to a conclusion in just 2 episodes, but then I realized it's 2 50-minute episodes, so it's basically a full-length movie still, which is just such the best thing about these Marvel shows is like there's so much more time. Like they're able to have essentially 4 villains, right, in this. We got the Flag Smashers, Dr. Walker, Zemo, and the Power Broker. Essentially 4 antagonistic forces, none of which have been even close to resolve yet, and we're 2/3 of the way through. And I'm slightly concerned that they will be able to wrap them all up in a way that makes sense and is fitting, but also they don't really have to because it's MCU, so if something goes slightly unresolved, they can always resolve it later. But like, they could never have fit this much stuff into just a 2-hour movie, and it's so great. So I'm really curious to see what happens next, and I'm curious because this episode in one way makes it a lot easier for Sam to end up with the Shield, in one way makes it almost impossible. Obviously, John Walker is not suitable to carry the Shield, and I think this just exposes it to everybody that that's the case. And so I think removing the Shield from him will be much easier than it had been previously. However, I also think the symbol of Captain America is now forever tainted in a way that I don't know if anybody should or would pick it up again. And I don't know if Sam would aim to restore it, or if he would be like, dang, I don't want to step into that if this is now what the world views Captain America as, the bloody shield. So I think it makes it easier in one way and nearly impossible in another way for Captain America to live on through Sam. But I still expect him to end up with the shield by the end of the finale. Maybe Bucky will take the wings, I don't know.
Well, you make a great point about all the loose ends not necessarily needing to be tied up. I think at this point, we all view the MCU as kind of just a big show. And every TV show or movie that comes out is just another episode in the MCU anthology. Now, obviously, the TV shows have individual episodes, but the Falcon and Winter Soldier episode here doesn't necessarily have to tie everything up in a neat little bow. It could leave Zemo in the wind here in the future for him to come back in another episode in a different movie or TV show down the line. And it's not like Marvel to just tie everything up perfectly at this point. They're definitely going to leave some things open. They've already said that this show isn't going to open as many doors or create as many theories as WandaVision, but they certainly can still have a lasting impact on the MCU moving forward. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what gets resolved here in the next 2 weeks, what doesn't, and then how the world has changed as a result. And I can't wait. The ending of this episode had me on the edge of my seat. My mouth was open, my jaw was on the floor, and I'm ready for another hour and a half of this fantastic series.
I'll tell you, this week-to-week thing is killing me. It's killing me. It's so great. I cannot wait for this week's episode.
The anticipation being built is unbelievable.
I've loved every second of this series, even though there are things that I think are not done perfectly. Like, it's not quite as nuanced as it claims to be, but even still, I think this has just been absolutely fantastic. And there's so many good character moments, and there's so many good action sequences. It's just like, it's really remarkable what they've been able to do with this. And we still got 2 more full episodes left, so we still got a lot of show left to go. So yeah, Steve, you know what I just thought of though? Yeah, I'll answer instead of making you guess, just like you asked at the beginning.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We only got 2 more weeks of this, and then we're going to have to figure out something else to talk about.
Oh, I think we'll have plenty to talk about. We'll have to see what comes up in the next couple of weeks, but haven't talked about the Snyder Cut at all. I know you still have to finish
That's
that,
true.
but that could be a real big episode or several parts of an episode.
A mini-series all on its own.
We could absolutely do a mini-series on the Snyder Cut. I enjoyed my watch through of that. I know you have a little bit left to go to finish it, but that could warrant a 6-part episodic journey of our own here. So we'll find some stuff to talk about. You and I are never short on conversation, so there'll be plenty down the pipeline for us to discuss. But that will do it here for episode 4. The world is watching, and the world is now waiting for episodes 5 and 6 because we can't wait to see the conclusion of this series. So catch us when we talk about episode 5 sometime next week.
We'll be back. The world's waiting for episode 5 and 6 of the show, and you fine people are waiting for episode 5 and 6 of this podcast. So
yes, we know that's really what you're waiting for.
Oh yeah,
we know that's really what you're waiting for, and so we'll get it to you. May not be first, but we're gonna have great in-depth conversation as always.
Yeah, come back if you have any comments or any ideas. Hit us up, and we will catch you next week. All right, deuces.
Peace.